Welcome to lesson 5.5 on the cosine law. In the last lesson, we explored the sine law. And the reason we explored the sine law and are now exploring the cosine law is because we realized our primary trigonometric ratios work extremely well if we have a 90-degree angle in our triangle. So, that is, if it's a right angled triangle. But as we learned, when we go to a triangle that is not right angled, we can't use just our primary trig ratios. We had to use the sine law to find out the sides and angles of a triangle. Now, we're going to explore the cosine law because we're going to find out very quickly we cannot use the sine law in every situation. In those situations, we'll use the cosine law to solve for a given side or angle. So, the cosine law has a relationship with the Pythagorean theorem that can be combined with the relationship an angle and its opposite sides have. So, I'm not going to go through the proof of the cosine law because it does get into some trigonometric identities, one in particular. Um, and you won't learn those until grade 11 math. So I didn't want to confuse anyone, but I have included a video um, that from Khan Academy that shows the proof of the cosine law. And if you want to watch it, it can help you to understand it a little bit more and extend your knowledge with it. So I'll leave that to you. What we really are concerned with, though, is knowing how and when to use the cosine law. So, in general, to use the sine law, we need to know a side and an angle across from it, and then one other piece of information, and we can use the sine law to solve for any side or any angle in a triangle. However, there's cases where we do not know an angle and its opposite side. And in those cases, we can't use the sine law. So we'll use the cosine law. Specifically, we use the cosine law when we're given two sides and the contained angle, or all three sides of a triangle. Formula for the cosine law for each side of a triangle is as follows. So we've got a squared equals b squared plus c squared, which looks a lot like the Pythagorean theorem, and it's based on the Pythagorean theorem, but we have a bit of a correction factor, and that is minus 2 times b times c times the cos of angle A. So we can use that for any of the three sides. And really, what you'll notice changes is whatever angle we're using. Well, this big equation is equal to the opposite side squared. So we need to make sure we're setting the proper side squared equal to everything else and using the appropriate angle. So we're going to go through and use these formulas. So, example, determine the length of C using the cosine law. So, just a little refresher here. We see angle 50 here, and then we have our two sides. And that angle of 50 degrees is contained between those two sides. So, unfortunately, we cannot use the sine law. We do not know an angle and the opposite side length. We know an angle and two side lengths, they're just not opposite each other, so the sine law does us no good. We need to use the cosine law. So remember, 50 degrees, that's angle C, so opposite it is side length C. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use our formula to solve for C. So we're going to use C squared equals A squared plus B squared minus 2 times A times B times the cos of C. So c squared is what we're looking for, and we're using angle C in our calculation. So now all it is a matter of putting in the numbers into our formula. Remember, these small lowercase letters represent side lengths. So this is like the side length of C squared equals the side length of A squared plus the side length of B squared minus 2 times the side length of A times the side length of B times cos of angle C. The angle is capitalized. So we're just going to plug in that information. We know A, if we look across from A, our side length there is 5.9. If we look across from angle B, our side length is 5. So we're just going to plug that right in. And so we get A squared is 5.9 squared plus B squared, which is 5 squared, minus 2 times A times B. So minus 2 times 5.9 times 5 times the cos of angle C, which is 50 degrees. And now all we're going to do is we're going to solve this and find out what c squared is, and then take the square root, and we'll have our answer. So if we go through, 5.9 squared is going to be 34.81, plus 5 squared is 25, minus 2 times 5 is minus 10, times 5.9 will give us minus 59. And if we do 50 and then hit the cos button on our calculator, we'll find out that's equal to 0.642788. So we're just going to try and consolidate everything here. So we can do minus 59 times 0.642788 will give us minus 37.92. And we can also add up the 34.81 plus 25 to give us 59.81. So we now have 59.81 minus 37.92 equals c squared. So c squared equals 21.89. Now we're just going to take the square root of both sides. Square root c squared, I'll just go to c. And we'll find out what the square root of 21.89 is. And because we're talking about lengths here, we want the positive value. We're not worried about the negative value. We can't have a negative length. So think of this as the absolute value of the square root of 21.89. So we do c equals square root of 21.89. And when we put that into our calculator, we'll get c equals 4.68. Or because our other sides are rounded to one decimal, I'm just going to round it to one decimal. So it's going to be 4.7. So the length of c is 4.7 units. So if we go back up to our triangle, this length here, which is little c, is equal to 4.8 units. 4.7 units. So that's 4.7 units. All right. So we've answered our first question using the cosine law. And we needed to use the cosine law because we had two sides and a contained angle and no other information. So let's take a look at another example. And this time we're going to determine angle A using the cosine law. So in this example, we know all three sides, but we know none of the angles. And what we want to do is we want to find this angle here, angle A. So we have to make sure that, of course, we look at the line opposite an angle, and that's going to be right here. We call that little a. And so we're going to use the version of the cosine law that starts with a squared equals, because then it'll use cosine of angle A. So we want to make very, very certain that we're doing that. So a squared is going to be equal to b squared plus c squared minus 2bc times cos A. A squared, well, we know A is 5, so that's 5 squared, equals 6 squared plus 2 squared, minus 2 times 6 times 2, times the cos of A. Now, just like we did before, we're going to go through and we're going to start to solve this. And what we'll find out is 5 squared is 25, and that equals 6 squared, which is 36, plus 2 squared, which is 4, and minus 2 times 6 times 2, which actually works out to minus 24. And all of that's multiplied by cos A. So minus 24 times cos A. Well, we're going to start to isolate A on the right-hand side. So we want to start moving some stuff over. Well, 36 plus 4 is going to give us 40. And when 40 moves over to the other side, it's going to be negative. So we now have 25 minus 40 equals minus 24 times the cos of angle A. So 25 minus 40 is going to give us minus 15 equals minus 24 times cos of A. Well, we still want to isolate for A, so our next step, we're going to divide both sides by negative 24. So minus 15 divided by minus 24 equals cos of A. A minus divided by a minus is going to give us a positive number. It's going to be a decimal. And in this case, it's 0.625 equals cos A. Now, we've seen these type of questions before. When we want to solve for an angle, what we need to do is use the inverse of cos. So cos negative 1. So we'll bring that to the other side. And this is the same thing as dividing both sides by cosine. So our cosines over here are going to drop out. We'll just have A. And here, instead of writing it as 0.625 divided by cos, we do the inverse, which is cos to the negative 1. This just tells us that in most of our calculators, what we're going to want to do is put 0.625, then hit that second function key to get our inverse trig functions, and then hit cosine. And when we do that, we should be getting that A is 51.3 approximately. So angle A is 51.3 degrees. So we just used cosine to solve for an angle when all we had were sides. So the cosine law can come in very handy for that. So angle A here is 51.3 degrees. All right. One more question. And we'll do a word problem here. A plane is 1 kilometer over. Let's try that again. A plane is 1 kilometer from one landmark and 2 kilometers from another. From the plane's point of view, the land between them encompasses a 45-degree angle. How far apart are the landmarks? So, we can see here the plane is 1 kilometer to one landmark, 2 kilometers to the other landmark, and the angle that kind of encompasses this entire area is 45 degrees. What we want to know is how far apart are these landmarks, so we want to find side C here. So what we're going to do, just like we did in the beginning, we're going to use the cosine law and we're going to solve for side C. So c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab times the cosine of c. A in this case is opposite angle A, so it's going to be 2 kilometers. And B is opposite angle B, and it's 1 kilometer. So, those are the numbers we're going to use. 2 for A, 1 for B. So c squared equals 2 squared plus 1 squared minus 2 times 1 times the cosine of 45. Now, once again, we're just going to start solving this, we're going to be able to solve everything on this side because we're not looking for an angle. So c squared is going to equal 2 squared, which is 4, plus 1 squared, which is 1. So that's going to go to 5. And then minus 2 times 1 is going to be minus 4 times the cos of 45. Once we're to this point, we want to find out what that decimal is. So we're going to do cos 45, and when we get our answer, and I believe it's 0.707 and change, we're going to multiply that by the negative 4, and that's going to become negative 2.828. So c squared equals 5 minus 2.828. 5 minus 2.828 is going to give us 2.172. So that's what c squared equals. C squared equals 2.172. Last step, take the square root of both sides, and then we'll know what c is. So the square root of c squared is just going to become c, and then we need the square root of 2.172. So in this case, c equals 1.47. And so we can say, therefore, the landmarks are approximately 1.5 kilometers apart, or 1.5 kilometers apart. So just going back up there, between A and B, that's about 1.5 approximately. And that is the cosine law. So it's really just making sure you're using the formula correctly. And if you've got a triangle and it's not labeled as A, B, and C, that's okay. Just look for the angle or the side that you're looking for, and make sure that you label those as either A, B, or C, and then use the corresponding formula for that. If you have any questions, let me know. I hope you enjoyed that. And now, maybe try a couple homework questions, and once you're done, you're ready for your final assignment, assignment 5. Now, almost final assignment. It's your actual final assignment. But remember, on Thursday, you're getting your culminating project. Anyways, if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be more than happy to help you. Take care.